When you hear Mali Empire, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For most of us, it's just one word: gold. Piles and piles of it, enough to make its emperor, Mansa Musa, maybe the richest person who ever lived. And look, that's definitely part of the story, but it's kind of like remembering Steve Jobs just for his black turtleneck. The bling is just a headline. So today, we're going to look past the gold to understand the absolutely brilliant system that created it. And that story, well, it kicks off with an economic crash that literally shook the known world.
Okay, so let's set the scene. It's the summer of 1324. We're in Cairo, which is basically the center of the universe at this point, the heart of the medieval Islamic world. And suddenly, its economy just tanks. We're talking a total collapse. But this wasn't a war. It wasn't a plague. It was a tourist.
Yep, a single visitor who was just passing through on his way to Mecca spent and gave away so much pure gold that he single-handedly triggered a massive recession, a recession that lasted for over a decade in what was then the most powerful economy on Earth. That visitor, his name was Mansa Musa, the Emperor of Mali.
And we're not talking about a little dip in the market here. This was an economic earthquake. The sheer amount of wealth that this one guy could just unleash was enough to destabilize the entire Mediterranean. It's honestly hard to even wrap your head around.
But that, of course, leads to the real question. How? Right? How could an empire from what Europeans at the time considered the mysterious, unknown heart of Africa have this kind of power? Well, the answer isn't as simple as just digging a bunch of gold out of the ground. No, it's about an incredibly sophisticated civilization, one that was built on law, on strategy, and on some serious vision.
See, to understand the money, you first have to understand the law. The Mali Empire wasn't some kind of tyranny run by a warlord with a huge army. It was actually a constitutional federation. It was governed by a set of laws that had been agreed upon way back in 1235. It's called the Kourakan Fuja.
And let's just put that date in perspective for a second. This constitution was created just 20 years after England's famous Magna Carta. And it was decades before the English Parliament even really started to look like it does today. So any idea of this being a primitive society, you can throw that right out the window. This was a politically advanced nation.
And this thing was incredibly forward-thinking. It had articles guaranteeing basic human rights, like the right to life. It even had environmental protection laws that sound like they could have been written yesterday. But here's the crucial part. It created something called the Gabara, a great assembly of clan leaders. That meant the emperor didn't have absolute power. He had to listen. He had to build consensus. And that political stability created a massive zone of peace, about the size of Western Europe, where trade and, of course, wealth could absolutely explode.
All right, so with that rock-solid legal and political foundation, let's talk about the economic engine. How did it actually work? How did Mali get so mind-bogglingly rich? Well, it all came down to controlling some of the most valuable real estate in the entire medieval world. At its peak, Mali controlled the source of about 2/3 of all the gold in the world. Just think about that. But it wasn't just gold. They also controlled the major trade routes that moved salt, a mineral so valuable down south that it was literally traded ounce for ounce with gold. By controlling and taxing this flow of goods, Mali basically became the indispensable middleman for global commerce.
But here is where the real genius comes in. The emperor didn't actually own the gold mines. Instead, he controlled the market with a really clever rule. All the gold dust that was found could be freely traded by the people. That fueled the everyday economy. But, and this is a big but, every single gold nugget belonged to the emperor. No exceptions. This did two amazing things. One, it gave the emperor a massive personal stash of wealth, and two, by keeping the biggest, purest form of gold off the market, it limited the supply and kept the price for all gold incredibly high. It's just brilliant.
Which brings us right back to that trip to Mecca, the one that changed history. Now that we understand the system behind all that wealth, we can see the Hajj for what it really was. This was no simple religious pilgrimage. Oh no. This was a carefully calculated announcement to the entire planet that Mali had arrived. It was the ultimate power move.
I mean, the sheer scale of this expedition is just staggering. Mansa Musa took 60,000 people with him across the Sahara Desert. You have to understand, that's not a caravan. That is a mobile city, a whole society on the move.
Among that crowd were 12,000 of his own personal servants, and each one of them was reportedly decked out in silk and carrying a solid gold staff. I mean, just imagine the logistics of keeping that many people alive and moving across thousands of miles of desert. It's just incredible.
And then, of course, there was the gold. Picture this, a train of 80 camels, and their only job, their sole purpose on this trip, was to carry gold. That's it, nothing else, just gold.
And each and every one of those 80 camels was loaded down with 300 pounds of pure gold dust. Now you do the math on that. We are talking about 24,000 pounds of gold. That's billions of dollars in today's money. And this was basically just his travel budget.
So when he finally gets to Cairo, there's this tense moment. Diplomatic protocol says he has to kiss the ground in front of the local sultan. But Mansa Musa, he refuses. He eventually agrees to a compromise, bowing, but says he's only bowing to God. The message could not have been clearer. I am not your subject, I am your equal.
And that's why he spent so much money. Crashing Cairo's economy wasn't just some accident because he was being overly generous. No way. It was a demonstration of power. It put every king and sultan from Europe to the Middle East on notice that a new superpower was on the scene, and its wealth could absolutely be used as a weapon.
But, the true legacy of Mansa Musa and the Mali Empire isn't really about the gold or the economic power plays. It's about what he did with all that wealth and influence when he got back home. He reinvested it. He poured it into building a world-class center of learning and culture. On his return journey, he annexed the city of Timbuktu and started a huge building program. He brought back the best scholars and architects from his travels and just pumped imperial money into transforming the city. The Sankora University there became one of the great intellectual hubs of the world. We're talking 25,000 students. That's the size of a major modern university. And its libraries held hundreds of thousands of manuscripts, books on everything from astronomy to law.
So what's the bottom line here? What should you really take away from all this? Well, it's that the story of Mansa Musa's gold is just the flashy entrance. The real story is about a complex, sophisticated civilization, one built on a progressive constitution and a brilliant economic strategy. It's a story about using soft power and economic might to shake up the world stage. And ultimately, it's a story whose most lasting legacy isn't all that gold, but knowledge.
The story of the Mali Empire really forces us to take a step back and reconsider what we think we know about world history, doesn't it? It's a powerful reminder that complex, advanced, and brilliant civilizations have existed everywhere, not just in the places we usually hear about. And that leaves us with one final thought. What other incredible histories have been boiled down to a simple headline, just waiting there for us to rediscover?